What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors decides he's had enough of a late-night host's antics? You won't believe what unfolds when Jeff Daniels sits down with Jimmy Kimmel for what was supposed to be a routine promotional interview. This isn't your typical celebrity chat. This is a masterclass in how a conversation can spiral completely out of control, leaving viewers stunned and social media exploding with reactions. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when these two clash in ways nobody saw coming. The tension was palpable from the moment Daniels walked onto the stage. Something felt different about his usual composed demeanor. Instead of the warm, engaging presence audiences expected, there was an edge to his movements, a stiffness in his smile as he shook Jimmy's hand. The veteran actor took his seat next to the host's desk, but his body language screamed discomfort. He sat rigidly upright, his hands clasped tightly together, eyes scanning the studio audience, with what could only be described as barely contained frustration. Jimmy, seemingly oblivious to the storm brewing beside him, launched into his typical routine. "Jeff Daniels, everybody," he announced with his trademark enthusiasm, gesturing toward his guest as the audience erupted in applause. But even as the clapping died down, there was an uncomfortable silence that lingered just a beat too long. Daniels nodded curtly at the crowd, offering a wave that felt more obligatory than genuine. "So, Jeff," Jimmy began, leaning back in his chair with that casual confidence that had made him a household name. "Great to have you back on the show. I have to ask, and I know this might be a sensitive topic, but there's been some buzz online about your recent comments regarding the current state of Hollywood. Some people are saying you've been pretty critical of the industry lately." The question hung in the air like a challenge. Daniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his response was measured. "I think it's important for people in our position to be honest about what we see happening around us, Jimmy. The industry has changed, and not always for the better." Jimmy's eyebrows shot up in mock surprise, that practiced look of someone who knew exactly what buttons he was pushing. "Oh, come on, Jeff. You've been in this business for decades. Surely you're not going to sit there and tell me that everything was better back in the day? That sounds a little like—" He paused for effect. "Well, like something an old man might say." The studio audience laughed nervously, but Daniels didn't crack a smile. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, his voice taking on a sharper edge. "I'm not talking about nostalgia, Jimmy. I'm talking about integrity, about the difference between entertainment that means something and entertainment that just fills time slots." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Jimmy's smile faltered for just a moment before he recovered, but the damage was done. The playful banter that usually characterized these interviews had taken a decidedly serious turn, and everyone in the studio could feel it. "Wow, okay," Jimmy said, his tone still light, but with an undertone that suggested he wasn't entirely pleased with the direction of the conversation. "So what you're saying is that shows like mine are just filling time slots? That's interesting." He turned to the audience with an exaggerated shrug. "I guess we're all just wasting our time here, folks." The audience laughed again, but it was forced, uncomfortable. Daniel's expression remained stone-cold, serious. "I'm saying that when you have a platform like this, you have a responsibility. And maybe, just maybe, that responsibility goes beyond making jokes about celebrities' personal lives and political cheap shots." The words hit their target. Jimmy's smile disappeared entirely, replaced by something much more calculating. The casual, fun-loving host persona began to crack, revealing something sharper underneath. The stage was set for what would become an unforgettable confrontation, but this was only the beginning. The real fireworks were about to start, and what happened next would change everything. Jimmy leaned forward in his chair, his voice dropping to a more serious register that his regular viewers rarely heard. "You know what, Jeff? That's rich coming from someone who spent half his career in Adam Sandler comedies. Tell me about responsibility while you were literally eating hair gel on screen. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the Jimmy they knew. This was someone with his claws out, ready to draw blood. Daniel's eyes flashed with genuine anger. At least I was honest about what those movies were. I didn't pretend they were anything more than entertainment. But you sit here night after night, hiding behind comedy while you tear people down, and then act surprised when someone calls you out on it. Tear people down? Jimmy's voice rose slightly, his famous composure beginning to crack. I make jokes. Jeff? It's called comedy? Maybe you've heard of it? Or did all that serious acting make you forget how to laugh? The tension in the studio was becoming suffocating. Camera operators glanced nervously at each other, unsure whether they should keep rolling. The producers in the booth were frantically whispering into their headsets, trying to decide whether to cut to commercial or let this train wreck continue to unfold. Daniel stood up abruptly from his chair, towering over the desk that separated him from his host. You want to talk about comedy? Real comedy punches up, not down. It challenges power, it doesn't bow down to it. But you've turned this show into a playground for cheap shots and political pandering. You've forgotten what it means to actually use humor to make a point. Jimmy shot up from his own chair, matching Daniel's aggressive posture. The carefully choreographed nature of the typical late-night interview had completely evaporated. Political? Pandering? Are you serious right now? I call out hypocrisy when I see it. I don't apologize for having opinions, and I sure as hell don't apologize for making jokes about people who deserve to be mocked. And who decides who deserves it, Jimmy? You? The network? The advertisers? Daniel's voice was rising now, his usual measured tone replaced by raw frustration. You've become exactly what's wrong with this industry. Someone who thinks having a platform gives you the right to be judge and jury. The audience sat in stunned silence. Many had their phones out, recording what was quickly becoming the most explosive late-night television moment in years. Social media was already lighting up with clips and reactions, but inside the studio, all attention was focused on these two men facing off like gladiators. Jimmy's mask had completely slipped now. Gone was any pretense of his affable persona. You know what your problem is, Jeff? You think because you played a newsman on TV, you actually understand how media works. You think because you delivered some sanctimonious speeches on The Newsroom, you're somehow above the rest of us. But here's the reality. You're just another actor who got lucky, and now you want to lecture the rest of us about integrity. The words hit Daniels like physical blows. His face flushed red, and for a moment it looked like he might actually reach across the desk. Instead, he took a step back, his voice dropping to something dangerously quiet. At least I earned my success by actually developing a craft, not by reading jokes other people wrote while kissing up to whoever's trending on Twitter that week. Jimmy laughed, but there was no humor in it, just bitter anger. Oh, that's perfect. The guy who made millions pretending to be stupid is going to lecture me about authenticity. Tell me, Jeff, how does it feel to know that most people still think of you as Lloyd Christmas? All that serious acting, all those prestige projects, and you're still just the guy who drove cross-country in a van. The insult hung in the air like poison. Daniel's hands clenched into fists at his sides, his entire body radiating fury. The camera caught every muscle in his jaw working as he fought to maintain some semblance of control. But everyone in that studio could see that the breaking point was rapidly approaching, and when it came, there would be no going back. For a moment that felt like an eternity. Neither man spoke. The silence was deafening, broken only by the barely audible hum of studio equipment and the collective held breath of 300 audience members who had come expecting laughs, but were witnessing something far more raw and real. Then Daniels spoke, his voice so low and controlled that it was somehow more terrifying than if he had screamed. You want to go there, Jimmy? You really want to do this? He took a step closer to the desk, his eyes never leaving the host's face. Let's talk about authenticity. Let's talk about what it means to earn respect in this business versus what it means to inherit a time slot and think that makes you untouchable. Jimmy's face had gone pale, but his ego wouldn't let him back down now. He had pushed too far to retreat, and everyone watching could sense that he knew it. I've been doing this job for over a decade, Jeff. I've interviewed presidents, I've hosted award shows, I've built something here. What have you built lately besides a reputation for being difficult to work with? The accusation hit its mark. Daniel's composure finally cracked completely. Difficult to work with? You mean unwilling to play along with the shallow, manufactured nonsense that passes for entertainment these days? Guilty as charged. His voice was rising now, each word delivered like a hammer blow. I've spent 40 years in this business, building something that matters, creating characters that resonate with people, working with directors who actually care about storytelling. And you sit there in your little kingdom, protected by your writers and your producers, taking cheap shots at people who can't fight back. Can't fight back? Jimmy's voice cracked slightly, the strain of maintaining his aggressive stance beginning to show. You're fighting back right now, aren't you? On my show, on my stage, using my platform to lecture me about integrity. The irony is incredible. Daniels laughed, but it was a harsh, bitter sound that made several audience members visibly flinch. Your platform? Jimmy, you don't own this platform. You're just the latest person to stand behind that desk. Before you, there was someone else. And after you're gone, there'll be someone else. The platform has integrity, even if the person using it doesn't. The words landed like a physical blow. Jimmy's face flushed red and his hands began to shake slightly. You sanctimonious piece of... He caught himself, remembering he was on live television, but the damage was already done. The mask had slipped completely, revealing something ugly underneath. Go ahead, Jimmy. Say it. Show everyone watching what you really are when the cameras are rolling and you can't hide behind your teleprompter. Daniels was leaning over the desk now, his face inches from Jimmy's. This is what happens when you push someone too far, when you mistake politeness for weakness. You've been doing this for years, inviting people on your show just so you can ambush them, make them the butt of your jokes, and then act surprised when someone finally calls you out. The studio was in complete chaos now. Producers were shouting into headsets. Security guards were moving closer to the stage, and audience members were pulling out their phones to capture every second of this unprecedented meltdown. But neither Daniels nor Jimmy seemed aware of anything except each other. You know what your problem is? Jimmy's voice was shaking with rage now, all pretense of professionalism abandoned. You think you're better than everyone else. You think because you've done some serious movies, because you've won some awards, that somehow makes you above the rest of us. But you're not. You're just another actor who got old and bitter and can't handle that the world moved on without you. The words hit their target with devastating precision. Daniels straightened up slowly, his face going completely white. For a moment he looked genuinely hurt, vulnerable in a way that was almost painful to watch. But then something shifted in his expression, something cold and final. When he spoke again, his voice was deadly quiet. You're absolutely right about one thing, Jimmy. The world has moved on. It's moved on to a place where people like you can build careers on cruelty and call it comedy, where ratings matter more than respect, where clicks matter more than truth. And maybe I am old-fashioned for thinking that's a problem. He was backing away from the desk now, his decision made. But here's what you're wrong about. I'm not bitter. I'm disappointed. Disappointed that this is what we've become. Jimmy stood frozen behind his desk, his face a mixture of rage and something that looked dangerously close to panic. He had pushed too far and he knew it, but his pride wouldn't let him back down now. Oh, spare me the sanctimonious speech, Jeff. You came on my show, you knew what you were getting into. Don't act like you're some innocent victim here. Daniel stopped his retreat and turned back to face his host one final time. The look in his eyes was something Jimmy had never seen before. Not anger, not hurt, but a kind of cold disappointment. That was somehow more devastating than any insult could have been. "You're right, Jimmy. I did know what I was getting into. That's exactly the problem." The studio had gone completely silent now. Even the producers had stopped shouting into their headsets, transfixed by what was unfolding before them. The audience sat motionless, phones recording, witnessing what everyone understood was a career-defining moment for both men involved. "I came here tonight because my publicist told me I had to. Because that's how this business works now. You have to play the game. You have to smile and laugh at the jokes, even when they're not funny. Even when they're mean-spirited. Even when they're beneath everyone involved." Daniel's voice was steady now, controlled, but every word carried the weight of decades in the entertainment industry. "But I'm done playing that game," Jimmy tried, to regain control, forcing that familiar smirk back onto his face. "Well, this has been fun, Jeff, but maybe we should—" "No." The single word cut through Jimmy's attempt at damage control like a blade. "You wanted to do this, so let's finish it. You want to know what I really think about what you do here? You take talented people and you reduce them to punchlines. You invite them onto your show under the pretense of promotion, and then you spend 10 minutes trying to embarrass them for your audience's entertainment. And the worst part? Most of them let you do it because they're too scared to fight back." The words hung in the air like an indictment. Jimmy's face had gone from pale to flushed and back to pale again. He opened his mouth to respond, but Daniels wasn't finished. "You know what the real tragedy is here, Jimmy? You're actually talented. I've seen you when you're not trying to be cruel, when you're not going for the cheap laugh at someone else's expense. You can be genuinely funny, genuinely charming, but somewhere along the way you decided that wasn't enough. You decided you needed to be mean to be relevant." For the first time in the entire confrontation, Jimmy seemed truly speechless. His usual arsenal of comebacks and deflections had completely abandoned him. He stood there, gripping the edge of his desk, looking for all the world like a man who had just realized he was drowning. Daniels began walking toward the side of the stage, but he paused one more time, turning back to address not Jimmy, but the camera directly. "To everyone watching at home, you deserve better than this. You deserve entertainment that doesn't require tearing people down to build itself up. You deserve comedy that punches up instead of down, that challenges instead of conforming, that brings people together instead of driving them apart." He looked back at Jimmy one final time. "And Jimmy, you deserve better too. You just have to decide if you want it badly enough to change." With that, Jeff Daniels walked off the stage with his head held high, leaving behind a stunned studio audience, a shell-shocked host, and what would become one of the most viral moments in late-night television history. The cameras kept rolling as Jimmy stood there alone, the silence stretching on uncomfortably long before someone finally had the presence of mind to cut to commercial. Within hours, clips of the confrontation were trending across every social media platform. Jeff Daniels was right became a rallying cry for viewers who had grown tired of mean-spirited late-night comedy. Industry insiders began speaking out about toxic workplace cultures and the pressure to participate in publicity cycles that often felt more like public humiliations. Jimmy's ratings plummeted in the weeks following the incident, with advertisers quietly pulling their support and A-list celebrities suddenly becoming unavailable for bookings. The confrontation had exposed something that many in Hollywood had known but rarely discussed, that the emperor had no clothes, and sometimes it takes someone with nothing left to lose to point it out. Jeff Daniels, meanwhile, saw his stock rise dramatically. His refusal to play along with an industry game that had grown increasingly toxic resonated with audiences hungry for authenticity. The man who had walked onto that stage to promote a project ended up promoting something far more valuable, the idea that integrity still mattered, even in Hollywood. The night that was supposed to be just another promotional appearance had become a watershed moment, proving that sometimes the most powerful thing an actor can do is simply refuse to act.